So hi, welcome to this एक और random video. Let's assume that it's the year 2075. Musk's effort to terraform Mars paid off, but now his son, I don't know how to pronounce that name. Yeah, the name on your screens has forced Musk to retire early and is sending him to Mars for his retired life. Arnab's Republic TV is airing their 20,000th episode on how the latest invention in science was written, though in a cryptic form, but already in our scriptures. And some nation, I won't take the name, again try to conquer Moscow in the winters. So now in the hindsight, what type of impact the orange men had on the geopolitical landscape is not the question anymore, because the people in the future, they live in this reality, and that political reality seems much closer to 2025's WWE than today's actual political landscape. Okay, hear me out. Gulf of Mexico being renamed as the Gulf of America is much closer to a renewed merchandise of a wrestler in wrestling entertainment than an actual geopolitical move. His plans to make Gaza the new Miami of Mediterranean sounds like the tagline on wrestler's t-shirt. And the latest episode with Zelensky definitely felt like The Rock cutting a promo for WrestleMania with Cody Rhodes. The similarities are uncanny. Now, talking about wrestling reminds me of a paper called The World of Wrestling from the book Mythologies, written by French literary critic Roland Barthes. According to Barthes, myth transforms history into nature and nature into a sign. Barthes says that if you compare wrestling with boxing, then it would make no sense, although they are of the same family of sports. A boxing match is a story constructed right in front of the eyes of the spectator, just like the traditional landscape of politics, where your views on a policy or a politician stems from the historical and contemporary narratives. For example, in boxing, if a boxer comes to the fight with a reputation of being a well-trained athlete in classical techniques of the sport, then he, in a sense, coming to the ring with the baggage of history on his shoulders. And if a guy with radical moves and punching style fights him and defeats him, then the fight is symbolized as the dawn of the sport, and the narrative takes the direction of the present overcoming the past. Just like in politics, where also every generation rallies behind the leaders who represent the problems of their present, the leaders who are fiery and relentless in their pursuit of their goals, compared to the leaders of the past who either have probably achieved the end goal of their narrative that they rallied behind, or the narrative of their generation isn't relevant anymore. Now compare the narrative story of boxing to wrestling entertainment. In wrestling, or rather in wrestling entertainment, it is each moment which is intelligible. The spectator is not interested in the rise and fall of the fortunes, rather he expects the transit image of passion in each moment. Wrestling therefore demands an immediate reading of juxtaposed meaning, so that there is no need to connect them. Thus, the function of a wrestler is not to win, rather it is to go exactly through the motions which are expected of him. He should offer excessive gestures exploited to the limits of their meaning. The grandiose of the actions of a wrestler are like ancient Greek theatre, whose principle, language and props conquered in an excessive visual explanation of the necessity. The gesture of vanquished wrestlers signifying to the audience a defeat. Far from disguising, he emphasizes and holds any emotion like pause in music. In wrestling, as in the ancient theatre, the performers are not ashamed of their suffering in defeat. They know how to cry. In fact, they have a liking for it. Each sign in wrestling is therefore endowed with absolute clarity, resulting in an illusion of a constant present, aided by the exaggerated reactions and emotions of the wrestler. Referring to the thing that has just occurred is the most important thing that has happened, and the job of the wrestler is to repeat the same with every move and every reaction and every emotion. Now, to compare this to our imagined political landscape of the year of 2075, I gave all three of the most famous AI models, ChatGPT, DeepSeek and Grok, our proposition and asked them to shed a light on the future. And the prompt was: Let's assume it's the year 2075 and Donald Trump has had his 3 terms as president by amending the constitution. It's been 42 years since his time as president of America, but he has introduced a new type of socio-political showmanship. The type in which the role perceived of a politician is much closer to the staging of a play rather than the actual events of the story it is based on. Keeping the Roland Barthes book MYTHOLOGIES and Guy Debord Society of Spectacle as the basis of this evaluation, point me a tentative picture of the socio-political landscape of the year of 2075 and the contributing effects Donald Trump had on the evolution of the same. With this prompt, all 3 of the models came to a similar sort of conclusion that I was thinking of, which is kinda scary that the future of philosophizing on YouTube is just feeding AI with the questions and the sort of lens you wanna tackle the sad concept with. Well, so much for philosophizing in 2075. ChatGPT started with an overhaul stating that
in the year 2075, politics has fully embraced the performative nature of governance, evolving into a grand spectacle where the symbolic has completely overtaken the real. The Trumpian model of political myth-making, rooted in spectacle, celebrity culture, and the reduction of governance to a hyper-mediated reality show format, has not only endured but transformed into the dominant mode of political engagement.
I asked ChatGPT to delve further in this, and she obliged, trying to paint a picture of the hyperreal stage of politics.
The political leader of 2075 is no longer merely a statesman but an actor, a character in an ongoing narrative that unfolds across augmented reality feeds, holographic news cycles, and immersive, gamified policy experiences. Governance is performed through highly orchestrated media events, ritualistic press conferences, AI-generated leader avatars that interact with citizens in real time, and choreographed crisis resolutions designed to maximize emotional impact rather than effectiveness. The truth of a policy or event matters less than its narrative power. Historical facts are rewritten on demand, and politicians no longer simply spin the truth, they construct entire realities with the help of sophisticated AI media ecosystems.
Elaborating on this, ChatGPT highlighted 3 main catalysts in the governance of the future.
The commodification of leadership. Political figures in 2075 function less as policymakers and more as franchises akin to Marvel superheroes or WWE characters. Leaders are designed for maximal audience engagement, with their personas carefully curated to fit demographic-specific mythologies, like Hulk Hogan or Tony Stark. Eternal Trumpism. While Trump himself has long passed, his AI-reconstructed persona continues to issue statements, provide endorsements, and influence political discourse through deepfake broadcasts and holographic rallies. His speeches, continually updated via machine learning models trained on his past rhetoric, allow him to remain a spectral presence in global politics.
And for the third point, we don't even have to travel to the future, as this one seems like an omniscient tale, from the inception of major religions to the appointment of my building secretary.
Theatrical populism. His approach to populism, simplistic narratives, strongman aesthetics, and an us versus them mentality, has been institutionalized into governance. Leaders must be both outsiders and messiahs, positioning themselves as anti-establishment saviors even when embedded in the highest offices.
Building on the same, ChatGPT shed a light on the role of her kind, being the role of AI in the future, categorizing that it is the end of reality as political category.
The irony is that while politics has become more theatrical, the actual mechanisms of power are more opaque than ever. AI bureaucracies manage the real administrative functions of the state, while the human political class exists solely to generate narrative cohesion. In a sense, the illusion of democracy is more elaborate than ever, but the substance of democratic participation has withered away.
Further, I fed the same prompt to DeepSeek, hoping that it won't be as censored as it is on anything to do with China and especially to Tiananmen Square massacre, which it wasn't. That to my surprise, it came up with 4 pillars on which this future of ours will stand.
The spectacle as governance, politics as grand guignol. By 2075, politics is no longer about policy, ideology, or even traditional power struggles. It is a continuous, self-referential performance. Trump's presidency, 2024 to 2036, set the precedent. His administration was less a government and more a production, where press briefings were scripted like reality TV episodes, executive orders were announced via viral AR holograms, and political opponents were framed as villains in an ongoing national drama.
To be honest, DeepSeek was much precise than ChatGPT, delving into the potential happenings on the path of the future.
After the 28th Amendment repealed term limits, justified under the guise of national stability, Trump's extended rule normalized the idea that leadership was not about governance, but about narrative control. By 2075, the presidency is a rotating cast of characters, each adhering to archetypes: the maverick, the strongman, the populist firebrand, rather than political platforms. Debord's spectacle has fully metastasized. The state exists primarily as an image, maintained by AI-curated deepfake news cycles and algorithmically tailored propaganda.
The second being the character of Trump evolving into a WWE-like character.
Mythologized history, Trump as the eternal protagonist. Trump's presidency, once controversial, has been mythologized as a golden age of American spectacle. His bombastic rallies, Twitter feuds, and legal battles are now taught as performance art, studied not for their political consequences, but for their dramatic tension. The Capitol riots of 2025, for instance, are remembered not as an insurrection but as a season finale, a climactic episode in the great American political drama. Archives from the early 21st century are re-edited into bingeable docuseries, where Trump is framed as a tragic hero fighting against a corrupt, deep state ensemble cast. Reality has been wholly supplanted by its representation.
Third one is something in a way actualized.
Elections are still held, but they are largely ceremonial, a ritualized vote audience participation event where the outcome is predetermined by narrative algorithms. Citizens no longer expect coherence, they expect entertainment. Political scandals are manufactured and resolved within 24-hour news cycles, designed to keep the populace engaged but never empowered. The spectacle demands constant emotional investment without the burden of material change.
The fourth one reminds me of the heel turns in wrestling.
The aestheticization of dissent. Barthes' observation that myth transforms history into nature is evident here. The idea of real opposition is now unthinkable. Activists are cast as anti-heroes in the political drama, their critiques neutered by their absorption into the spectacle's logic. In this world, Debord's warning has come to pass. All that was once directly lived has become mere representation. The spectacle is no longer a tool of politics, it is politics. And the show, as they say, must go on.
At last, I fed the same prompt to the actual crusader with a cross in this conversation, that being Grok, and ironically, it ended up being more liberal with its assessment, stating that
by 2075, the United States and much of the Western world has evolved into a hyper-theatrical socio-political arena where governance is less about policy substance and more about mythic performance. Politics is no longer a debate over tangible outcomes but a staged spectacle, akin to Barthes' analysis of wrestling, where the public consumes the gestures of power rather than its effects. Trump, in this imagined timeline, perfected this during his presidency, turning press conferences into dramatic monologues, policy announcements into reality TV cliffhangers, and elections into pageants of charisma.
Grok utilized its imagination about the events of the future much better than the other two. It went on stating,
by 2075, his successors, whether political heirs or rivals, have fully adopted this playbook, rendering the presidency a role closer to a celebrity ringmaster than a traditional statesman. Trump's 3 terms, let's say ending in 2033, normalized a politics of distraction where tax reforms or climate policies were overshadowed by viral feuds or grandiose stunts. Imagine a literal golden Trump Tower rebuilt as a people's palace. By 2075, this has metastasized. Citizens vote not on platforms but on vibes, curated by algorithm-driven media empires that trace their lineage to Trump's branding genius. Political parties have splintered into factions defined less by ideology than by aesthetic. The neon patriots with their bombastic light shows, the eco-dramatists staging tearful climate soliloquies. Drawing from Barthes, these groups craft myths, say, the eternal frontier or green redemption, that turn messy realities, economic inequality, environmental collapse, into digestible stories. Debord's spectacle ensures these myths are consumed passively. Citizens, inundated with tailored feeds, rarely question the script.
in the next one, it went on to hit the Indian nerve in me, just as all those reacting to India videos on YouTube.
Trump's effects ripple outward. Globally, leaders emulate his model. India's prime minister might host glitzy unity galas while China's Politburo stages choreographed harmony operas. Democracy, where it persists, is a performance art, its substance eroded by the need to entertain.
So there's no grand conclusion to this narrative. It's all cyclical. I'm also trying to sell this as a certain paranoia, implying that Trump is a pivotal point, but most probably he's not. So if you are bought into my constant present, then leave a like, and if you have a version of the same, then leave it in the comments. Other than this, history is cyclical. So everybody at every moment in the history feels like that the events happening in the span of his existence are the most pivotal. But to be honest, it's just beyond us. Bye.